Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pivoted Success podcast, hosted by Sean Cochran of TCC Canada and myself, Jared Goldsmith from ESACS. We're very pleased today to welcome one of the most recognizable names in the City of Ottawa, Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. Mayor Watson, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jared.
So, Mayor Watson, usually when we interview community leaders and business owners, they're here talking about their organization or charity or their initiatives. But in your case, your organization is quite large. Would you care to give us a little bit of background on what you do?
Well, thank you, Jared. First, let me begin by thanking you very much and Sean for putting this on. I was just saying before we went on the air, I miss seeing you and the Fedora at ESACS at the Horticulture Building. That was always a great opportunity to network and help one another as small business people, and thank you for your kindness and inviting me many times to speak to your group. The city is playing a pretty important role in COVID because obviously we're the deliverer of services, whether it's Ottawa Public Health, the paramedic service, police, fire, bylaw, regulatory affairs, economic development, Invest Ottawa. All of these groups working in harmony with one another, along with the hospitals and long-term care homes, to try to minimize the deaths and the challenges that COVID has faced. Both human beings as a human, we're affected obviously by the loss of a loved one or people becoming ill, and then the economic impact that it's having on people, particularly in small business, those people who work for small business and entrepreneurs. And, what we're trying to do with the city is we developed a two-pronged approach right after COVID arrived on our borders, basically 2 days ago, 1 year ago, 2 days ago. Yeah. And that is helping the most vulnerable, those people who are homeless, those people who are trying to self-isolate and they can't because they're living in shelters, through the Human Needs Task Force, and then the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force, excuse me, that's co-chaired by my colleagues, Deputy Mayor Laura Dudas and Eli El Shantiri. And that is a group made up of a number of organizations, the BIAs, the Council of BIAs, Invest Ottawa, Tourism Ottawa, Regroupement des Gens d'Affaires, the music industry, Festival Network, and many others that play an important, the Board of Trade, of course, play an important role in economic development. And what can we do with our limited tools in our toolkit to help those businesses survive during a really difficult time?
Yeah, that's a really good lead-in. We're actually interviewing Su Ling Ching of the Ottawa Board of Trade next week, because the purpose of this is to hear from community business leaders on adapting to COVID, specifically tailored for small business, inspiration, support, knowledge, resources. So, Mayor Watson, before we get into a little bit about how the city has been affected, how about yourself? Like, how were you affected once everybody realized the scope of what we were in? May we ask, how did you deal with it?
Well, look, at my issues are minuscule compared to those who have everything in many instances, had to close their doors, lay off their employees. So I don't even want to sound like I have any challenges. I think the biggest issue that I have is, I'm used to going to 14 or 15 different events in a weekend, and I have nothing to go to now. No store openings or business banquets or sports banquets and so on. So that's a little problem. We're doing a lot more Zoom calls, greetings on video, certificates that we're giving out because the economy still continues to move on. Our city has the lowest unemployment rate of the top 6 cities in Canada. It's still too high, obviously, but it's better than every other major city in the country, which is good news. We have a good basis with government employees, obviously, as a foundation here. High tech is generally doing better than retail, and the tourism and hospitality industry has suffered greatly as well. So, my own personal lot in life is not really that important because, as I mentioned to my colleagues on council, we still continue to collect the paycheck every 2 weeks. So we don't have that stress on our minds as we try our very best to make sure that we do everything possible to avoid companies and businesses going out of business. And just as an example, today, for instance, we heard rather last minute that the province was putting us back in the red zone, which creates more restrictions. And I announced immediately after that, when we found out, that we were going to fast track the patios opening, which normally on a road allowance would be April 1st. So we're doing it about 2 weeks in advance, effective today. And I tweeted that out. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback because at least it gives those restaurants that now will be limited to 10 people starting tomorrow in dining experience can now have people on their patio. Same rules, physically distance 2 meters between tables, only 4 people per table. But it gives some of these restaurants a fighting chance to survive. Yeah. And the good weather, thank goodness, is coming. I think this Saturday, it's going to be 11 or 12, and then 12 or 13 on Sunday. So we're in for some good weather.
I mean, being proactive. I remember last fall or last spring or summer when the city decided to relax their the fee structures for outdoor restaurants and permits. It's that forward thinking that.
Well, we did it again this year, and we're eliminating the patio fee. So I know one restaurateur on Preston Street told me last year it saved him $8,000. So that was a significant amount of money. We normally would charge on a road allowance and so on. So we waived it last year. We waived it this year. I've asked the city treasurer to come up with a plan on how we can develop a small business tax category so that we're not lumping the mom and pop operations in with the big office towers here in downtown Ottawa. And that will it's not going to save them, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it'll save them thousands of dollars depending on the size of their business. So any small way we can help, because as you know, we don't have a lot of tools that allow us to give direct financial assistance to businesses.
Well, and that's just it, Mayor. Like you said, is any little bit helps right now. So, I mean, any little bit that we can all do to sort of help ease the pain of a lot of these small businesses is so important. You mentioned earlier, of course, your day-to-day usually was whipping between event. Take us back to sort of just over a year ago. How was that transition for you from the 40 events a day to 0, just instantly?
Yeah, I felt worse for the organizers because a lot of the events that I get the honor of going to are charity events that raise money for some really important causes in our community. And same with the festival network. They put a lot of effort all year long into that one-day event or into that one-week blues fest or jazz fest or chamber music fest. And then it's all gone because you can't have a crowd, you can't have any activity. So one of the first decisions I made was to ensure that we continued to provide the base funding to the festival network so that they had fixed costs. They would basically be bankrupt and have to shut their doors and not be able to put on another festival because they were out of business. So the province and the federal government followed suit with us. So we provided them with that base funding. And people, some people were critical. Well, you're paying them and they're not doing anything. Well, they actually are doing a lot of stuff. They did a lot of stuff. They booked a lot of bands, and special events, lighting and staging and so on. They had to pay those bills. And we're doing the same this year because unfortunately, I don't think you're going to see a lot of big festivals being able to go back to normal days, certainly in the summer. Maybe you can see some light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps in late summer, early fall, September, October, when most of us will have had our vaccinations.
Yeah, I mean, talking about those large events, a good friend of ours is Michael Wood, who I know you've been becoming frequently more known with him these days, and he was on our podcast recently. I mean, his organization, anybody has anything to do with the events, and especially like the live music, the restaurateurs, perhaps the hoteliers, the devastated. And how do we move forward from this?
Yeah, and I think you look at an area like Lansdowne, which was doing so well. Yeah. Up to COVID, and then every line of business they were in were the worst hit. Special events, sporting events, retail, that's basically Lansdowne, and all three were wiped out in the span of one day. So listen, I'm very optimistic. As I said, we have a really strong economic base. When we were just going into COVID, we had the lowest unemployment rate in 30 years. High tech was booming. Shopify was bursting at the seams. Tourism was on a high from the success we built in 2017 with the Sesquicentennial. And then it all came not crashing down, but crumbling down in some industries. And so that's why I encourage our citizens. A lot of them are retired federal public servants who have a good pension. A lot of them public servants that are paid well. You got to shop local. Now is not the time to go to the big online American companies to buy your goods. Go down Elgin Street, Montreal Road, Manotick Main Street, Bank Street, Elgin, and support these little businesses, because they're the ones that you go to get your kid's soccer team sponsored, or you go for a gift basket for a charity. Amazon's not doing that. They're a big employer in Ottawa. I get that, but they'll survive. But a lot of these small businesses won't if we don't help them out. So I went out, during the last shutdown, and I bought 7 $100 gift cards at different restaurants. One in the South End, 2 in the East, 2 in the West, 2 downtown, and it just helps them with their cash flow. And people like me often forget to cash them in, and we lose them. So it's even a bonus for the small business. But we need to help these folks, because you go down any street in the city right now and you see an awful lot of for lease signs or closed signs. And we can argue all we want about whether we should be in red or not. I would have preferred that at least they give us the 48 hours notice, so that the restaurants who bought all their food for the weekend can still salvage most of it, with Friday night dinner, Saturday night, and Sunday night.
Yeah. Well, speaking of supporting local, I think I've seen some of your tweets at Jim Watts in Ottawa about some of the pictures you've taken from the meals and you naming the restaurants. This is the type of support that can really leverage the need for exactly this: walking down your local strip of your BIA or your Main Street and purchasing. Gift certificates are fabulous. Maybe
it's one way of helping. We're working closely with Rogers. They've been doing a lot of shop local advertisements on their community channel for us. As I mentioned, we've got the small business tax rate that we're looking at. We did in last year allow a tax deferral for businesses and residences, and a couple thousand people took advantage of that. It wasn't waiving the taxes. We need the taxes to pay for public health and police and fire, and we don't have that luxury of waiving those taxes. But it helped, with 3 or 4 months deferral a little bit, I'm told, by some people who took advantage of it.
So, Mayor, as you mentioned before, of course, your day-to-day was a lot of events and that sort of stuff. But operationally, yourself in the city, how prepared were you for such a drastic change from the normal day-to-day sort of interacting with people to the virtual experience that we're all sort of living through still today?
I'm very proud, Sean, that the city moved really quickly. There's always sort of people out there, governments move so slow, but actually we did move quickly. We had the Bronson testing center set up, was one of the first in Ontario. We recognized the lineups were too long, so we went to an appointment-based system, opened one in the East End, one in the West, one in the South. We got our employees, those who could work from home. A lot of our employees obviously are everyone from picking up the recycling to police and paramedics and firefighters and roads crews. They're already working outside so that they weren't all that affected. A lot of our people inside had to make sure that we had the capacity in their computer at home and internet to work from home. We didn't, we saw a record number of building permits issued last year, despite the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And the turnaround time improved greatly because we went and developed a lot of our products online, so people didn't have to line up. And so you get a marriage license now online. You couldn't do that before. So all of that was done literally within a couple of weeks to 2 months at the beginning of COVID. Shutting down recreation programs, and we had to lay off 4,200 part-time seasonal employees, lifeguards, Zamboni drivers, the like, because there's no people using those facilities. We set up the economic task force, the human needs task force. We got extra hotel capacity, motel capacity for people who were in shelters but had to physically distance, and you can't, and the shelters are so busy because of the cold weather. So a lot of balls in the air, but our staff under the direction of Steve Kanalakis, the city manager, and Tony DeMonte and Dr. Etches, we really knocked down a lot of silos, and we worked really well together to get, as now needles in arms. We've got another two centers opening on Saturday for the over 80 group. Got into the high risk areas. We did our medical folks. We were the first big city in Ontario to get all of our long-term care home residents who wanted a needle, their 2 shots, and now we're about 80% through the second shot of retirement homes. So, we're moving at pretty fast pace, and we thank the federal and provincial governments because we've incurred a lot of expenses. It's been the perfect storm between reduced revenues, transit, ridership down, rentals of ice and swimming pools and so on. So we have that issue of lack of revenue, and then we have the increased costs of overtime for public health nurses and so on. So the federal and provincial government have been very helpful.
Mayor Watson, you were talking about a little bit of the efficiencies of, say, the online format, the platforms. What about staff efficiencies? I know it from, a low end, small micro business, no travel, no traffic, don't have to find parking. Meeting after meeting, my production level has increased 1,000-fold. I mean, I worked it out when COVID started. I'm probably saving 12 or 15 hours a week, not having to go to Canada and then bouncing around to the different venues, just meeting after meeting. Have you found the efficiencies? Are you able to see that? Is that even feasible for the city?
It is. We're looking, for instance, that we've mapped every employee's postal code on a map of Ottawa where people live. And it's not surprising the bulk of the people live in Orleans, Canada, and Barhaven. And yet, some of them are going to the Constellation building in Nepean, some are going to the Client Service Center in Orleans or Canada or City Hall here downtown. So we're looking at whether some of those people can actually work at a building closer to them, as opposed to coming all the way downtown.
Oh, this is the shared office space. I know there's one in Orleans, Place Orleans.
Yeah. I don't think it's in Place Orleans. We have the old Peter Clark building, the old Cumberland Town Hall on Central. That we have some space there. So those things are being looked at, but eventually we want to get our employees, as many who can come back as safely as possible, and federal employees downtown, not only just to be selfish, we want them back on the rails and buses, but these little shops here that relied on, business that's on Spark Street or Rideau Street in the Byward Market, they need their customer base back. And their customer base were people who worked in these tall buildings, just as I look out on Elgin Street through my window here.
Actually, Sean is in the industry of shared office space. Maybe if you'd like to ask him something, Sean.
No, it's good to see the sort of look to flexibility and the employee more so than before for a lot of organizations that we're talking to. So it's very nice to hear that's just on the table now, whereas before the idea of working remotely or any of that stuff was quite a sort of high expectation. Whereas now I think things are going to change, which I really like.
Yeah, I think, there's no question more people will work from home, and to some people that works well. In my case, the people I've talked to really want to come back to work. They want to have that social interaction. They want to be able to pop into someone's office, see what you're working on, gossip around the water cooler and everything in between. They just want that human connection. And, I'm the same way. I'm fortunate I have a few of my colleagues from my office come in when I'm in the office. And they've been a great source of help making sure that, the business of the city continues to get done, because we now have all our meetings by Zoom, and there's good things and bad things about that. I think it makes it easier for more people to participate, because you don't have to get in your car or get on the bus and come all the way downtown and wait for 2 hours in a meeting that's going overtime. But then, there's other people that say it's not as meaningful a discussion because you don't see people, firsthand. But, for the time being, it's the safe thing to do. And, we're fortunate none of our councillors have contracted COVID-19. I don't believe any of their staff have. Most of them are working from home as well and getting the job done.
What are you most excited about? Let's put your magical fedora on, Mayor Watson. About let's go short term, even 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now. Where do you see the city going and adapting and moving forward?
Make this the last one because I have a call with the Minister of Health in 3 minutes, so I'm going to have to speak quickly. I apologize, but my schedule sometimes gets a little changed with COVID. Dealing with COVID. I see us, gradually opening up, getting more people to come and work back in their office buildings and their environments. A real push to get more local tourism moving, staycations as they're called, marketing efforts in Toronto, Kingston, Montreal, one tank trips, they're called in the tourism industry, to get people to come and visit, use Via Rail to get here, use our train system, get the airport back up to respectable levels. It's really hurting, as you can imagine, with so few flights. The impacts will be with us a long time. That people who get COVID, some of them still continue to suffer. So there's stress on the healthcare system. That's going to need our help, mostly the provincial government's help. But we're moving forward. Phase 2 of LRT is well underway. You see it in the east, west, and south. The library, the new library, is a big economic generator. We'll break ground later this year at LeBreton Flats. That will be the first phase of LeBreton revitalization. We're working with Lansdowne to see how we can make it more economically feasible, given the fact they've had a rough year with COVID. And just doing whatever we can with the small business community to try to roll out the red carpet and not the red tape, and be flexible so that we recognize that they've been through a catastrophic experience, and they're still suffering as a result.
Well, Mayor Watson, thank you so much for your time, and it's so great to hear about the leadership that and going forward, and the future it can be very bright. So thank you very much for everything you do, Mayor Watson. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.